Hello and welcome back to my channel. The Giro d'Italia is right around the corner and yeah, that's why I'm wearing this color today. So let's talk about the favorites for this race, for the first Grand Tour of the year and probably the most exciting one of all three Grand Tours. Yes, from a prestige standpoint, the Tour de France is still higher ranked than the Giro d'Italia. But in my opinion, for more than a decade, the Tour of Italy has been actually the better race. Far more interesting, better stage design, better racing in total. And yeah, this is my favorite Grand Tour of the year. And let's get into it. So we'll actually have a pretty good sprinter field. We also already knew that Elia Viviani would start, but recently we heard that Fernando Gaviria would also start. So these two will be at the start line. Then we also have Caleb Ewan, we will have Demar, Nizzolo, Simolai, Modolo. Then Ackermann got the start ahead of Sam Bennett for Bora Hansgrohe. We also have Gavazzi, Rojas, Lobato, or the young gun Moschetti. You could even mention Marechko, even though he will probably only be good at the pan-flat stages, but there are some, so he could be in contention. So yeah, the top three, in my opinion, are Gaviria, Viviani, and Caleb Ewan. Those three should get the most wins. I don't know if any of them will drop out after a few stages to prepare better for the Tour de France. I doubt that Viviani will step off the bike because currently he is the national champion of Italy and I think he wants to honor this race and win the points jersey at the end. But Gaviria could very well opt to quit the Giro after a few stage wins and then prepare for the Tour de France. So yeah, all in all, it's a pretty good sprinter field. And we'll have to see who gets the most stages of them all. Can't wait for that one, even though most people are not that fond of sprinter stages because most of the time the only action is happening inside the last few kilometers. But even though that action makes up for it all, for the wait, and it's actually pretty exciting. But yeah, the Grand Tour is most of the time all about the climbers, about the general classification, who takes the overall. And this year we have a pretty strong start list, even though a few riders are injured, but more on that later when we come to those riders. But yeah, all in all, it's a very strong field actually. I think it's for the first time in years that the start list is actually better than the Tour de France. Usually all the star riders go to France and the lesser riders go to Italy or Spain for their yearly Grand Tour. But this year I honestly think that the Giro d'Italia managed to attract bigger stars, bigger climbers, bigger riders for the overall than the Tour de France will have in 2019. Maybe because the design, this year we will have 3 time trials that also will have played a part. But yeah, let's get into it. My personal top favorite is Roglic, because so far he has won every race he entered in 2019. He won the UAE Tour, he won Tirreno Adriatico, and also is leading the Tour de Romandie at the moment, which will end soon, but yeah, he's leading the overall in that race as well. So he's ridden 3 stage races and probably will win them all. He may not have the strongest team of all the contenders, but still a pretty solid one, and as an individual, I have to put him at the top step. Then we'll have last year's second place rider, Tom Dumoulin. He did not have as great of a season so far as Roglic, but because there are 3 time trials, I have to put him that high up. And maybe he just took a slow approach and wants to be at 100% at the Giro d'Italia. We don't know if Roglic can keep this form up because, like I said, he has won every race, so he is in form for quite some time. He is the man of the moment when it comes to GC riding, but how long can you hold your form? We've seen in the classics with Sagan or even Alaphilippe that if you try to hold your form for too long, then the results will go down after a while. So yeah, next on my list is Nibali. Nibali is already 34, but he is probably the most accomplished rider of them all, or the most accomplished starter of this race. That's a better way of wording it. So yeah, he has won quite a few Grand Tours already. He has won them all. He won twice the Giro d'Italia previously. He won the Tour de France. He won the Vuelta. And I think he has a pretty decent shot. His form is as good as it has ever been shortly before a Grand Tour. If you look at his recent results in 2019, then he was 8th at Sanremo and Liège-Bastogne-Liège, and recently 3rd at the Tour of the Alps. So maybe he did peak too early, but I doubt it. Nibali knows his body very well. He's usually very well prepared. He could have had a chance last year, but then that injury came, that crash came, and yeah, we'll have to see. I think he's a pretty decent shot. He has a pretty decent shot at winning the overall. Not quite the top favorite, but he should be among the best once again. Then the next rider on my list is Miguel Angel Lopez of Astana. The time trials, that will be a big factor for him, but climbing wise, he should be one of the best riders of this race. He has one of the strongest teams of the year so far in Astana. Great support for him at this race, and yeah, keep your eyes out for him. Then we have Simon Yates, who cracked last year badly. He made up for it by winning the Vuelta a España. But the Giro is still on my mind. How he just faded in the last week. He was in pink for most of the time, and then he had two really bad days, and that cost him the overall in the end. This year, I think after the Vuelta, he knows how to save his energy for 3 weeks. And he should be a contender for the overall once again. But we'll have to see. Because he cracked last year, I can't put him at the top step. Also, his results so far, if we are speaking purely about general classification, has not been the best. He has won two stages in 2019. But in the general classification, he has not a very good finish so far. But yeah, like I said, he should know how to handle 3 weeks by now, and maybe he can conserve more energy this year around and actually finish off the Giro d'Italia. Then on my list, I wanted to mention Bernal because I did this list yesterday, and then I did not do the video yesterday, and luckily for me, because a few hours later, I read that he had a crash in training, broke his collarbone. He will be out of the Giro d'Italia and will probably ride the Tour de France together with Froome and Geraint Thomas. So Ineos will field the three-headed monster in July. But the big question is now, who will ride the Giro d'Italia as a captain for Team Ineos or former Team Sky? Because even though they have talented guys like Tao Geoghegan Hart or Sivakov, great riders, but are they ready to lead a Grand Tour already? Now Brailsford is looking into whether Geraint Thomas could start the Giro d'Italia because, well, they wanted to actually do well in this race. Bernal was one of the big favorites for this race. I mean, he was 3rd at Catalonia, won Paris-Nice. He was in really great shape, and then this happens. So yeah, now Ineos is for now without a leader, because the two other top stars in Thomas and Froome both want to ride the Tour de France, and they don't want to change their program at the last minute, because the Giro d'Italia starts next week and they have different plans. They are not in top shape at the moment. We've seen it with Geraint Thomas this week at the Tour de Romandie, that he is not totally out of shape, but we see that his goal is to be at 100% in July and not in May. So that would be an interesting team to watch for this race, because as of now they don't have a leader, but a lot of good riders who could go stage hunting, a lot of young riders who are big talents but probably not ready to challenge the overall quite yet. Then I have Landa on my list. Landa is a difficult rider to assess, because he has, climbing wise, all the talent in the world, but once again a rider who lacks time trial. Then also the injury of Valverde means that a valuable helper will be missing from his team. And the other thing is that Landa over the last few years had a few crashes, dropped out of a lot of races, or finished, well, not at the top step because he fell at crucial points in the race. So yeah, quite a bit unfortunate for Landa over the past few years. But I think if we are talking just on the climbs, he should be one of the better riders. We'll have to see if he can survive the time trials, just like Superman, Miguel Angel Lopez. Those two will be riders who could actually lose a few positions in those 3 time trials, even though they are not pan-flat and they are hilly, which would mean that they have a better chance at not losing too much time. Still, 3 stages against the clock. We'll have to see how that will pan out for them. Then I have Zakharin on my list, and he has to deliver in this race, because Katyusha's season, they are really not doing well. They only have 2 victories so far in 2019, one from Rick Zabel and one from Marcel Kittel. Other than that, nothing from this team. And also Zakharin has not done well in week-long stage races, but that does not surprise me, because if we look at his palmarès, he was never the rider who did well in 1 week stage races, but always excels at 3-week tours, the Grand Tours of the year. Those are where he is at his best, probably. So yeah, but he'll be under a lot of pressure, because the team is not doing well this season so far. And yeah, Zakharin, I think he has a decent shot at the top 5. I don't know if he can win it, but for the sake of Katyusha, he should do very well for the team. Then I have David Formolo of Bora Hansgrohe. I think he will be the captain and not Micah, because last year he was already in 10th place in the general classification after finishing 8th at Liège-Bastogne-Liège, or was it 7th? No, 7th it was actually. So this year he finished actually 2nd, so once again he's in good form ahead of the Giro d'Italia. Last year was already in 10th place, so maybe he can up that a few places. I doubt he'll be on the podium at the end, but something between the places, well, 5 and 10, I think is within the possibilities of a rider like Formolo. Then on my list I have Bob Jungels, who was actually twice the best young rider in this race in the past. Not last year, but the 2 years before that. He was 6th and then 8th, and both times he won the best young rider classification. And he is a good climber, not one of the best. He will lose time to some of the other riders on the climbs, but he's a pretty solid time trialist, and there he will make up for that lost time on the climbs. Once again, I don't think that he can finish on the podium or win the Giro d'Italia, but another top 10 finish could be within his reach because of the 3 time trials in this race. But for Jungels, I also want to mention that probably he should switch his focus from trying to be a GC rider and finishing, well, in 8th place or something like that, or last year at the Tour de France 11th place. He should go for the classics. He already won Liège-Bastogne-Liège, and this year at his first cobbled campaign in his career, he showed signs of being a very dangerous rider in those kind of races in this terrain. So he can do it all. He can be a factor in the Ardennes, but also on the cobbles. And yes, while he has a good time trial, he has good regeneration. I think he's best suited for the classics. But it's hard to argue. If you finish inside the top 10, well, you think, okay, if I push myself a little harder, I could get the podium, I could get the top 5. But why be content with a top 5 finish when you could actually win in the classics? But that's just my opinion. We'll have to see how Bob Jungels does in this Giro d'Italia, and that may give us a final answer what he should do in the future. He's still pretty young and can still decide whether he wants to focus on general classification or cobbled classics or classics in general. And then lastly, I want to talk about Mollema, because funny enough, every 2 years he finishes a Grand Tour inside the top 10. In 2013 and 15 it was the Tour de France. In 2017 it was the Giro d'Italia. Now we'll have 2019, and it is time again for Bauke Mollema to finish a Grand Tour inside the top 10. That rounds up my personal favorites for this race. I want to talk about, those are the climbers for the general classification, which I expect to be high up. Of course, some teams will maybe have 2 riders or even more up in the general classification, maybe Astana or so. So that will mean that some of these riders I just mentioned won't make it to the top 10 at the end. But maybe also some other riders crash out during the race, which would put them up higher again. You'll never know about that, but those are the 10 or 11 captains that I think could do very well in the general classification. I think right as of now there are 3 to 4 riders who could actually challenge for the overall victory. Those riders I mentioned at the start, the later riders, I think they could challenge for a top 10 placing, maybe even podium or top 5. But yeah, what else is there to talk about? Well, there are also stage hunters, riders who just they don't have it when it comes to having the form for 3 weeks, but on their day in a breakaway they could challenge for a victory. And I wrote down a few riders which I think could do very well and end up taking 1 or 2 stages from breakaways. Those include Battaglin, Brambilla. Of course, when it comes to breakaways, you have to mention Thomas de Gent. Tanel Kangat for Education First had a few good races recently, so I think he'll be up for the task. Then Tony Galopin, he may try to go for the overall, but I think he would be better suited for stage hunting. We'll have to see what he does at this race. Then young gun Maduas, who had a pretty solid Ardennes campaign, so I think on the lumpy stages, if he attacks and goes for it, he has a decent shot at taking a stage victory home. Then I also want to mention Ulissi, who took over for UAE when Dan Martin wasn't feeling very well when he was ill, and had a good result in the Ardennes at Flèche Wallonne, finished in 3rd place at the end in that race. So yeah, he has the form once again. We'll have to see how he does. Those are some interesting riders. There are many, many more riders I could talk about for different reasons, but I think the important stuff we covered. I probably forgot a lot of riders. You will mention them hopefully in the comments, which riders I forgot, and maybe then we can talk about that more. down below. Other than that, I think that should be it for me for now. Until then, I'm out.